So it is all happening. Welcome to the All 32 podcast, the inaugural episode, the debut, the first. They all mean the same thing. I'm Mike Giardi, alongside Will Parkinson. Will, of course, from Turn on the Jets podcast. TOJ talks on Badlands. Will, we talked about this probably for a year, and it probably took a year for it to happen. But I'm excited it is finally happening, and excited to cover the league in this manner.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. I think it's, again, something we've been talking about for a long time now. And football's in the air, pads are on at training camps, and we're going to dive into all 32 teams. Get you covered, whether you're a fan out west, a fan on the East Coast, a Jets Patriots fan, or someone supporting the Chargers out in LA. We got you covered.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm really excited about. I think there's a lot of hyper specific pods that address their team and their team only. You can find them. Will does it for the Jets. I'm on a guest on plenty of pods that talk strictly about the Patriots, but we have such a great interest in the whole league, and we want to bring you the whole league and sort of dig beyond just the headline stuff, although there'll be some of that too as well. Today being a prime example, I need to remind you here that Game Time brings you the show. Best tickets, best prices to get you in any game that you want to go. For instance, Red Sox playing the Mariners, or Red Sox this weekend against the Astros. If you're a Yankee fan, like somebody on this pod is, and that somebody wouldn't be me. They've got the Blue Jays coming up the beginning of August. You get tickets from them. They are primo. Definitely want to use them. But well, let's get right into the action. Don't want to make people wait any longer. And I want to start here in my backyard. I've been covering them since the start of training camp. I've actually been covering them for 25 years. That's the New England Patriots, who have had quite an eventful week. Christian Barmore diagnosed with blood clots. He is out indefinitely. There's no timetable on that. Devon Godchow, unhappy with his contract. He just got a contract extension, 2 years, $21 million. But the big story is Matthew Judon, who decided after saying, I'm going to play for the contract, even if I don't like the contract about $6.5 million with another million in roster bonuses, showed up for the first day of padded practices on Monday, not wearing any pads, wearing slides, in fact, brought his phone out there, had his baseball hat on. I'm sure you've read the comments by now, the stories rather, but Judon had a little discussion with Gerard Mayo that didn't seem to go very well. They had a discussion later on. Judon left the field, came back, went to the general manager, Elliott Wolf, and his henchman, Matt Crow, and has not been with the team. They're off on Wednesday. Hasn't been with the team, Will, but it's interesting now because it was a very public act. I've said this before. I think he embarrassed himself. I think he embarrassed his first-year head coach. I think he embarrassed his first-year general manager. There are reports that there has been another contract offer extended. He jumped right in on Twitter on Wednesday and said, that's a lie. That hasn't happened. How do you view this from the outside looking in, and what do you think the Patriots should do with Judon?
Yeah, there's a couple different things. We'll get to a bunch of the different kind of holdouts and hold-ins, and, Judon's essentially holding in here. And one of the kind of interesting things is, you mentioned embarrassing, Bill Wolf himself potentially and Gerard Mayo. This isn't just a first-year head coach that Judon has no relationship with. He's been his defensive coordinator for the last couple of years, and that's, to me, what makes it even a little bit more tricky and kind of really digging his feet in. I had thought, for some reason in my head, I always thought Matt Judon was like 28 going into his age 29 season. I didn't realize he's turning 32 in 2 weeks here, and for whatever reason, sometimes guys in the NFL, Ezekiel Elliott's 27 years old, and you're like, what? And then other guys are much older than you realize. And, from a Patriots perspective and from Judon, you understand Judon wanting to get one big final payday. We'll talk about, guys like Reddick and Trent Williams and other guys that are, entering their age 30 or above season and wanting those big deals. The issue with the Judon Patriots thing for me, and this is why I think he ends up getting moved at some point, is if I was the Patriots, I'd move Matt Judon, not because he's not an awesome player. He's probably their best player. He would be crucial to help try to keep this team competitive with a potential rookie quarterback starting at some point this year. The timelines don't match up for Judon's peak productivity and what the Patriots are looking to do, right? They're a team that you assume in 2025 will try to be very competitive. They'll probably have a bunch of cap space. They'll be able to acquire different picks. They were probably a team that'll pick in the top 5, realistically, unless Drake May hits the ground running and that defense keeps them competitive. They're probably going to be one of the bottom dwellers, at least this year. They can show signs. It's not they're going to be screwed forever. It's just this year is going to be a step back. And to me, I feel like if you pay Judon now, and even if you gave him a 2-year extension, by the time he's getting his big money, does it line up with how good you're trying to be with a rookie quarterback? Yeah. And again, you don't want to lose talent, but is he worth, I don't know, ball spitting. He's get a 2 and a, did they get a 2 and a 4 back next year from, a competitive team and say, hey, now we have 4, 5, 6 top 50 picks plus cap space, plus a rookie or a guy going into year 2. Drake May showed signs. We feel good about Gerard Mayo. We feel good. Christian Barmore back off of what he's dealing with. Christian Gonzalez in year 3. Like, that to me is probably more of the smart play. But again, there's the emotion of it. Judon's been an awesome Patriot. He's a good player, and it's kind of hard for an organization that's been, even in bad years, still very competitive to kind of just fully embrace that tank mode.
Yeah, I look at it, and I was one who said I would be willing to extend him even beyond this year. But what are we talking about monetarily? And that's the thing that I've been reporting, is that there's a huge gap between the two sides, and such to the point where I don't know how you bridge the gap. And I think that's why you saw it play out the way it did on the first day of pads, where I think the frustration has set in and the reality has set in. Like, man, I'm here and they're here, and how do we find a way to meet in the middle? What I was hoping all along was, at the very least, you could say, hey, Matthew, you made 15-ish last year. You're on the books, as I said, he's on the books for 14 and change with the cap, but in terms of actual cash, if everything goes well this year, he's making $7.2 million, I believe. Like, can we double that? Can we give you $10 million extra dollars or something with reachable incentives to kind of get you to that point? And then you're free to go. You have an awesome year. You hit free agency. Who knows? Maybe we love you and thought we saw so much we want to give you a big extension, or you just go into free agency and you try to cash in one last time. But it feels like now this has become so public and he is becoming defiant. I mean, I understand the day and age. I'm not the old guy yelling at a cloud, but like, stay off Twitter. Like, but to me, that's the point. Like, if you've gone on Twitter now and you're pushing this thing forward,
he's all in.
It's like, yeah, he's all in. Like, basically, pay me or trade me. And it feels like they're dug in and saying, we're only going to go so far. It's not as if they haven't offered. But like I said, his presentation to them versus what they're presenting to him is, would you pay someone who's about to turn 32 who missed 13 and a half games last year, albeit for a bicep, not for his legs? His legs, I think, are still good. Would you pay him 2 years and $50 million?
Probably
that's something
not.
Will Parkinson would do. Yeah.
Nah, probably not. And I think that's something, and we'll talk about this with the Jets, but like, it's the same. It's a different conversation with Son Reddick. He's younger. He's an edge rusher. That sack totals are they're the fourth best in the league over the last 4 years. But it's, again, the conversation of, does the timeline match up? With the Reddick situation, it matches up with the Jets. That's why it's frustrating. The Patriots, I keep coming back to this, it's the timeline of when you're trying to win and capitalizing. And like, if you're the Patriots in 2 years, do you want to have the Von Miller contract? If you're the Bill, you know what I mean? Like, that's where they're at, and they can afford to do it, right? Again, they're not paying a lot of people, and the Patriots haven't really paid a lot of people in a very long time in terms of that big money. But, you just look to yourself down the road and it's like, all right, do we want to try to – the Patriots, in my head at least, and again, you know this better than me, they're probably trying to say, get one more year out of Uche and Judon and this group, and then decide if Uche is awesome again, like the way he was 2 years ago, we'll pay him. If Judon looks fantastic, we pay him. You just wonder, can they do something similar to, raise some of the cash this year, give him something? I don't know. I don't think this ends well, and it just doesn't feel like there's other situations. Ayuk, he was seen. We'll get to that again, but dapping up John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan at practice today, and it feels like a guy they want to have around. It's just trying to figure out that number. This kind of feels like, I don't know that Matt Judon also probably really wants, at some point, does he not go, I want to go try to win one more shot at winning a title when I'm in my prime, or at least close to it. Go trade me to Washington, and we're going to go to a young team that, like, that division, someone always wins every year, and me and Montez, are the Bears or something. Like, I don't know. I just
the Bears is the one. I think I texted you that one. Just if we're at this point where now all of a sudden he's dangled out there, the Bears have been looking for someone opposite.
Yeah,
Sweat.
I was going to say they were in on Bryce Huff. They were in on Bryce Huff early in the year, and that's after paying, Sweat. So it's not as if this is a team that wasn't pursuing edge rushers in the free agency market as well.
And they've been a popular pick to maybe slide into the postseason. Well, if they really believe that in Chicago, if they really believe Caleb is going to be able to handle that group, and then defensively, that's what they need is another edge rusher, then that's a phone call worth making. And I'm curious, I'm still thinking like it's a 4 or a 5, but who knows? Maybe somebody looks at it and says, all right, we talked to him. He's good coming here. We're going to work on the deal or whatever. And maybe the price becomes a little bit higher in terms of what they get in return. You mentioned Reddick. We might as well get into that because that's been a wild scenario that has been going on for a little while here. The reports that they offered him a contract before they traded for him, he said no, and they still did the trade, figuring out we'll work it out. And lo and behold, he has no loyalty to them, so he's not showing up. How is this playing right now with the Jets? And do you think something gets taken care of here relatively soon?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things kind of to follow here. The Jets traded for him back the end of March and beginning of April 1st, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And look, Hassan Reddick he's got the fourth most sacks in the NFL, since 2020. He's been a guy who signed a 3-year, $45 million deal with Philadelphia. He's from Philly, grew up an Eagles fan. He went to Temple. Dream scenario, year one, goes to the Super Bowl with the Eagles, finishes, I think, third or fourth in Defensive Player of the Year, 17-plus sacks. He had like 7 or 8 forced fumbles. He was unbelievable. Really good again last year. It wasn't 17 sacks good. I think he was 11 or 11 and a half.
Right.
Really good player. He's, age 29 season. So age 26 through age 29, Reddick, who's a former first rounder. The Cardinals weirdly played at linebacker back in the day, if fans remember. And then, goes to Carolina for that year and is really good, goes to Philly. The Jets trade for him after losing Bryce Huff. That's a conversation for another day. Still doesn't make any sense why they let him walk, but whatever. That's the prerogative. Philly replaces him with a younger option.
I was a huge Bryce Huff guy,
yeah,
so
exactly.
I am a huge Bryce Huff guy.
And so the Jets trade for him, generally speaking, and this is not like uncommon knowledge, when teams are going to trade for a guy, and this is what's going to happen with Matt Judon if he does get moved, and they say, hey, go find a trade partner. If you want an extension, usually they'll grant you permission to go talk to that player kind of off the record a little bit. Hey, we're thinking about making a move for you here. What are the numbers going to look like? Some back channeling. This is what happens, not just in football in any sport, but, obviously the Jets had some preliminary conversations with what an extension or a raise for Reddick would look like. They offered him something. I don't know the exact amount. He turned it down. Look, the Jets very well could have said, here's 16 and a half instead of 14 and a half. And he could have said, piss off. Like that's a very realistic possibility.
Yeah.
Then Reddick said he was going to show up. This is all at the same time. He comes in for a physical. I'll be here for OTAs and minicamp. The Jets then on draft day trade John Franklin Myers after losing Bryce Huff. Now the leverage is even more for Hassan Reddick, right? Hey, I really want to get paid. I have no connection or loyalty to you. Again, he's never played for the Jets, doesn't play for any of these staff members or anything like that. Reddick, obviously, someone gave him some type of advice. You need to get paid more than whatever they were talking about with you earlier. He held out. He gave up a $250,000 workout bonus, offseason bonus, and then was fined for not being there. I think $50,000 or $100,000 for not being there all offseason. The Jets were phrased, hey, we haven't talked to him. Interesting wording. Again, it's not really relevant at this point. It would have been more relevant back in the past. Camp shows up. Day one, everyone's there. Hassan Reddick's not there. $50,000 a day until he shows up. Saturday, actually Monday, I believe, when I was out of practice, was a big kind of barometer of how serious Reddick was about this. He's obviously getting up all this money. He wants something either of a 2-year, 3-year deal, whatever it is, some type of big money extension, and from all reports in the $25 to $28 million a year window, which is kind of what I'd been talking about on my podcast and on Twitter for months, is that the Danielle Hunter deal that Houston gave Hunter, same age, same production level, same position, etc. Hunter got 2 years, 48 and a half, if I'm not mistaken, almost all fully guaranteed, if not all. Mm-hmm. That's very much what I think Reddick is probably where he's at. He's not the top of the market. We'll get to Micah, but the Nick Bosa at 32, 33, TJ Watts at high 20s, Garrett at high 20s. He's more in the that $25 to $28 million range, which I think is fair. The other option was to give Reddick a Band-Aid similar to what you mentioned with Judon. Hey, you're at 14 and a half this year, fully unguaranteed, which is part of the deal, which is why it was a great deal for Philly. They got top 5 edge play for 2 years for middle market money. Reddick's the 17th or 18th highest paid edge rusher based on cap hit this year. I get it. Again, he wants a big money deal. Yeah. So it comes down to, do they give him something similar to what Khalil Mack took with the Chargers? Hey, 1 year, you'll go back and you'll hit free agency at about $19 million. Do they add in incentives to get him to 25? Hey, you make an all-pro team, you'll get this. And they've done a lot of this offseason, the Jets, with Tyron Smith, with Mike Williams, other guys, a lot of incentive-based deals. From the Jets' perspective, they want to see the team go out and perform. Woody spent a lot of cash the last decade. It's something we'll get into on future episodes with a lot of the guys that are coming up for extensions with the Jets, how they approach this thing. But, if they're them, they've Reddick's tape was great, and I think the Jets want to extend him, or at least that 2-year window. The Jets have Rodgers for 2 years. Jermaine Johnson still has 3 years remaining on his deal. You can 2 years of Reddick, you let him walk. You have Will McDonald and Jermaine for a couple of years. The issue is that on Monday, the Jets basically fined Son Reddick another $300,000, and you got to find another 50 today. He's now up to about $750,000 or $800,000 in fines, which you expect the Jets to reimburse. That's, again, another thing in the NFL. When these guys get an extension after holding out, they usually give them back the money and as part of the deal. Mike, I guess from your perspective, this thing's gotten kind of ugly kind of quickly, and I thought it'd be done Monday because of that big $300,000 number. Reddick seems not really to care. And the Jets also, I don't think internally are too happy that he's not only not showing up, but it's been a pretty flawless first 6 or 7 days at camp. And this is a huge cloud. I wonder if this doesn't get done before they have a scrimmage Saturday. That feels like it's not done by then. Now we're in a joint practices in preseason. Now we're getting, pretty serious here.
Yeah, and I think criticism of Joe Douglas would be fair for going ahead and doing this and then not having a sense of how you're going to get it done. It's sort of, it's the Judon thing. I put this on Elliott Wolf when they gave him his 2024 money in 2023. That was Belichick who did that. But they knew at that point, and Elliott was in the front office, they knew at that point that when we get to this point next year, he sure as hell ain't going to play for that. Now he has the injury, and maybe they thought, we can sort of rough him up a little bit here, and he'll take maybe less than he should have because he's coming off the injury. But the guy's like, I'm one of the top 10 sack guys in the last 3 years that he's been with the Patriots. Why should I take less? Reddick's looking at the same thing. Like, the market has gone bananas in a lot of different places. Edge rusher's one of them. I want mine. Give me mine. And you guys are the ones up against it because, as you said, the timetable is now. It's now everything. They're putting all the chips on the table. And if he's not there, well, as you mentioned, Franklin Myers is gone. They let Huff walk out the door. You got to rely on Will McDonald more. Now, maybe Will McDonald grabs the job and never lets it go. And then it turns out to be, okay, well, we made a bad trade, but it all works out in the end. But in the meantime, Reddick is such a damn good player. Yeah, I would think that there's got to be some serious conversations here over the next few days to try to get it done. Or then, I don't know what you do at that point. Like, really, because I think then the hard feelings, they're bad feelings already, then they become worse. And then that fine continues to grow. And it's like, well, what exactly are we doing here? So, if I'm them, he's got me a little bit over a barrel. Yeah. And I'm trying to figure out a way to get it done. And maybe in this case, maybe it isn't about the extension. Maybe this is just, we're going to give you a crap ton of money for one season, get your butt in here and go deliver. And then you can cash in here or somewhere else in the off season. You mentioned how pretty much flawless it's been. There's been a couple odd reports about Rodgers and Garrett Wilson maybe yelling at each other. And Rodgers came out on Wednesday and was like, you guys aren't, you don't know what you're talking about. But from a on the field perspective, how good has Rodgers looked as he's come back from the Achilles and obviously from the drama of not being here for minicamp?
Yeah, he showed up with the cat shirt and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, he's just so cute.
Yeah, he knows exactly what he's doing, right? And look, I think I've been out at practice a couple of days here, and Rodgers probably had his best day today. I'll start from the beginning. Like, Rodgers came back in all spring. All the reports were, he's probably 95% in terms of like full confidence in the Achilles. I think he talked about that as well. There's that mental piece of it, shake off some of the rust, blisters and the whole thing, which is, again, natural. When you come back from a serious injury, you work really hard and something else usually happens. For him, it was blisters, which blisters suck. And like, I'm not diminishing it. Yeah. It's just it's OTAs and whatever. But the arm still looked awesome. And comes into camp the first 4 days for the Jets, obviously, and I guess any team based on the CBA, helmets and it's helmets and shorts, and you're kind of getting ramped up there. And Jets offense looked fantastic. Garrett Wilson and Rodgers have been as in sync as it gets, and on the field especially. I'll get to the dialogue, but they put on pads on Monday, and the offense, Rodgers looks fine, but the offense, Joe Tittman was struggling with snaps, something we haven't really seen too much of. He had a little bit of an issue last year, but nothing that would have concerned you. He had like 6 or 7 in like a 15 play period. Like it was a lot. Rodgers so much as spazzed out on him and snapped the effing ball. What the F are you doing? The whole 9 yards. Yeah. And I don't blame him, because not only did he snap the ball a couple times badly in a row, but then they went under center instead. Rodgers goes to take a step to go hand the ball off, and Tippmann steps on his foot and tripped Rodgers. And obviously didn't make him too happy, especially when you're 40 years old. You don't want anybody tripping you. That said, Rodgers came back today, full padded practice. They have a walkthrough tomorrow, and Rodgers they did a red zone period. He went 11 of 13 with 6 touchdowns. And the Jets had 8 total touchdowns in the red zone passing all year last year. Zach Wilson had 6. It's impressive. He's, got Malachi Corley involved today. Him and Garrett Wilson connected for 3 more touchdowns. He connected with 2 for, Breece Hall for 2 of them. So Rodgers has looked really good. The thing I was the most pleased with is my biggest question, nothing to do with his arm, nothing to do with his brain, nothing to do with anything else. It was confidence moving around in the pocket, because people forget Rodgers is such an accurate passer. That's not really what has always made Rodgers. It's that he's moved around the pocket better than anybody, not to run. We talk about Mahomes and Allen and all these guys. Rodgers kind of started, I feel like, that move around in the pocket to throw, like scramble to throw, and then use your legs on third down and things when you need to. He ran for a first down and then moved the chains period the other day. Has got his foot stepped on and got back up and was fine. Like, these little tests to me. So he's looked fantastic. He's looked just as good. If honestly, like, him and Garrett even look better than they did last year, at the same time. So all signs point to him being probably better than I think most people are going to be giving him credit for. Do I think he's going to win the MVP? I don't know. I doubt it. I doubt people will even vote for him if that's the case, just based on, like, he's got his own enemies in the media. That we know how this works, the Barry Bonds method. Yeah. But, I do think to some extent, I think he's a lot closer. He'll be a lot closer to 2 in the AFC East in terms of the quarterback rankings, I think, than he will be to 4. I think there's some, right? I don't know. At least
I was going to jump in because you talked about Corley, and Corley is an interesting guy. They traded up to get, correct? And he is the Yak King, a small school guy, sort of people have compared him to Deebo Samuel. He's just a bit smaller, but sort of that guy that you want to get him the ball in a variety of different ways because he's just really good with the football in his hands. He's not an accomplished route runner yet. That's something he clearly is going to need to work on. But you have him, you have Garrett Wilson, and then you have
Mike Williams.
Right. But what do you expect from Mike Williams? And that really leads me into the next part of this conversation, and that is the thing that has continued to, I think, loom over the offseason. The Raiders are going to suck. Davante Adams keeps getting asked about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, and he keeps talking about them. Even though he says he's happy where he is, he keeps talking about the Jets. The Jets have an extra third-round pick this coming draft.
They do.
It feels like just comment, it just feels like it's going to happen at some point based on what you can gather from the Jets and what you can gather from what the pieces that they have gathered around him. How much sense does it make? And is it something that you could see happening even before we get into the regular season?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of a chain reactions you got a list of chain reactions that are going to happen here. I think that this Davante the Jets thing is not going to stop until the 4 p.m. After week 9 during the trade deadline. The only way I think the 2 ways this does not happen, because it feels like the Raiders, even as much as Davante Adams and Max Crosby and all these guys stood on the table for Antonio Pierce, I truly feel like the interim tag usually happens with these guys where Josh McDaniels was so bad and Jimmy Garoppolo was getting Davante Adams killed so much that, like, anything else, whether it be Aiden O'Connell and Antonio Pierce, is such an upgrade that you just, like, you feel fine. I looked at Deshaun Reed, who a friend of the show, I guess we'll phrase it as, was reporting. People asked him, how's Davante look in camp? He said he's been quiet, but it's not his fault. And to me, that means all the issues that he had last year are kind of the same issues. It's just he's a coach that he respects more. At some point, if you're the Raiders, we talked about this whole timeline thing. Davante's got one more this year, is one more year, big money. He's got big money next year, but you can move it.
He wants a new deal. He's seen when everybody's getting tossed around, going, he still believes he's the best. He might still be the best, but so that plays into it as well. Do you want to not only pay him huge money next year, but then do you want to tack on 3 more years at $30-something million per, because that's what he's going to be asking for.
Yeah, I think that if you're the Jets, you obviously try to work out something where, hey, like, we're gonna keep Davante and this core group together as long as we can, but Davante and Aaron and a couple of these older guys, maybe eventually you get to it. Maybe if Tyron Smith looks good again, like those guys, they kind of did it with CJ Mosley. Instead of having him one more big year this year, they kind of spread it out, so it's 2 years essentially with Mosley. We've seen it with Rodgers. The Raiders probably will not be good unless something changes drastically.
I just can't see it.
The
Those two
yeah.
The cornerbacks are bad. The schedule's bad. Like, Gardner Minshew was a popular topic in New England. Like, could he be the bridge quarterback? And I'm like, you saw him play the Patriots in Germany, and he was almost as bad as Mac Jones was. And Mac Jones threw one of the worst interceptions that I've ever seen in that game that kind of sealed his fate here in New England. But it's like, he's nothing, just like Aiden O'Connell is. He's a guy who, if you have to, for 3-4 weeks, you get by with. And I guess that would put him in that next tier of like quarterbacks. But like, if he's your guy long term, you got trouble.
Yeah, no, and I just think, it's not so much that it's just that they've talked about Davante was a popular, link there from all reports last year. Like, he very much would have been a Jet last year if Rodgers doesn't get hurt. Like, this is not a new thing. They're all fair, and the Jets have the money to make it happen. You mentioned that extra 3rd-round pick. It makes it even more confusing why they traded back at one point last year and didn't get an additional 3, but then a later pick got an additional 3 for next year. Again, whole nother discussion. It's just they have multiple 3s. They have a 2 next year. They have their full complement of picks. It feels to me like 2 3s probably gets it done. 2 3s and a 6 for a 7 and Davante or whatever it is.
Really?
I've seen a lot of talk. It's not going to cost a 1. He's 32 years old. I don't even think it's going to cost a 2, to be honest with you, because this is where it's getting where I think the smoke is getting a lot. And you mentioned it's been a topic of conversation. Rodgers and Davante have gone out of their way to both talk about the Jets like so much, and Davante to the Jets, and we were talking about golf and whatever. Yeah, okay. And Davante's gone on every podcast, and anyone that'll listen to what he's saying and saying the only guy I'll ever play with other than the Raiders is the Jets, and I only play with Aaron. And I can just say this from being around the Jets: if the Jets add to an offense that already has Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson and even a Tyler Conklin and a Mike Williams and Rodgers and an offensive line that should be really good and defense and all that stuff, you add Davante and like you can mean Garrett Wilson's going to be one-on-one every snap or Davante's going to be one-on-one every snap. Like you can put Zach Wilson back there and I don't know if they might still be a playoff team. Like that's how, and Zach Wilson's probably not going to make an NFL roster this year. Like that's what kind of talent we're talking about. And again, it's this short window, but they're all in. And if you're going to be all in, just go for it. And to me, again, unless the Raiders surprise everybody, and unless something happens to Aaron and the Jets totally tank and they're 2-5, like anything above 500 and the Raiders, anything below 500, middle of the season, Mike Greenberg's been saying Halloween, they play on that Thursday night and then the next week they don't play, I think, again until Sunday night. After week 7, I feel like if Davante is not a Jet, I'd probably be somewhat surprised at this point.
I would be exciting to see, even like just in terms of a football thing, because as you mentioned, if you haven't watched Garrett Wilson closely, and obviously if you watched him closely and wonder sometimes why he doesn't get the ball, you just mentioned one of the reasons why. Zach Wilson, you guys had the Jets had the poo-poo platter of quarterbacks that I mentioned last year. It was pretty disgusting. So even if Rodgers is the Rodgers of his last year in Green Bay, would be a massive upgrade. And heaven forbid that he gets into the Wayback Machine and becomes the guy that he was a year prior to that. And then, like, as you mentioned, if you have all those pieces, that would be an incredible cachet of weapons in which he would have at his disposal, and he can utilize them. I want to take a quick break. We should take a quick break here on the All 32 pod, but we come back. A few more things on contracts, and then we're going to make a little bit of a bold prediction. Breakout candidates in each the AFC and the NFC. Stick around. Will, you love in the summertime. I know you. You love to go to Yankees games. I'm not going to hold it against you. It's a nice park. The team I can live without, but whatever. You're that guy. Who do you use? Do you use anybody in particular when you need your tickets and you want to find that best seat? Maybe the day of. You're like, oh, man, I got time. I'm going to go to a game tonight. It's beautiful out. Me and the girl, we're going to go to the game.
No, for me right now, it's Game Time app. It's incredibly easy to use, incredibly efficient. You find some of the best seats and some of the best deals, on the market for whether you're going to Yankees, Red Sox, or any type of sport. Yeah, it's funny. My daughter keeps saying, when are we going to a game? When are we going to a game? I'm like, well, let me get the app. We put the app, we go, bam, we're done. It's so simple. It's so easy. The interface is just fantastic. You want to use that. GameTime.co. Last minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you need. Game Time's got it. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets this season with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
We are back. Mike Giardi, Will Parkinson, the All 32 pod. All right, let's buzz through a couple NFC topics. I want to start with the Cowboys, who have three really important players, three of the better players at their position. Certainly, Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb may very well be 1 and 2 in their positions. Dak Prescott, we can argue about that. All of them displeased with contracts. Lamb holding out. Prescott going to the last year of his deal. Parsons going to want probably more money than any defensive player has ever gotten, and he's going to get it, whether it's from the Cowboys or someone else. And Jerry Jones, Will, is kind of crying poor. I don't know how we're going to do all this stuff. How do you, if I get your crystal ball out, how does this go? Do they get Lamb in camp before all said and done and on a long-term deal? Does Prescott get an extension from them? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think I'll roll down the list here. I think CeeDee Lamb will get done probably soon here. It feels like infamous Pretty Ricky, on Twitter is reporting it's done. He's been all over stuff, so it's hard not to question him. It seems like Lamb's the one that's the parameters are the easiest to get done in terms of what the receiver market looks like. It's obviously out of control, but again, we just saw DJ Moore get paid, and we'll get to that. But I think Lamb gets done because superstar, the jersey sales, the whole 9 yards. We know Jerry's obsessed with that stuff. Dak, I feel like Dak is going to get ugly, and I think it's going to get ugly next offseason. I don't know that it gets done this offseason. The quarterback money feels like it's so out of control that they're going to wait and see what the new cap is and next year. And, some other new TV deal will kick in the whole 9 yards, and it went up a huge amount this year. Does it go up again? Do they institute this real quarterback salary cap? Something we'll kind of have to monitor throughout the year. I know it's been suggested. That's a thing that could be talked about of, what percent of a quarterback could take up of the cap and all this stuff. So I don't think Dak gets done. I think Dak will be a $60 million quarterback, and I think we'll be talking about next offseason Dak Prescott as a Giant or Dak Prescott in Carolina because they're over Bryce Young. You know what I mean? Like I just think we're going to see Dak will get paid a truckload of money, either with the Cowboys or somewhere else, but I think he'll be the guy that'll be the next highest paid guy when his time is there. Mike is a weird one because apparently, again, based on whatever reporting you want to believe, he wants not only to be the highest paid defensive player ever, but like by a significant margin. And Nick Bosa's at 32 or 34, depending on, how much money. I saw stuff floated that, Micah wants to be paid 36, 37 a year. And it's like, I don't even know that he's better than like 5 of the other guys. I know that's not how free agency works and extensions work. I just feel like it'll get done. I don't know that this going into the season, is Micah like a week 8 extension type of guy, or is he do they just do Dak and Micah next year and say, hey, let these guys play in one more year and we'll take the consequence if they ball out again and their number goes up? Jerry Jones crying poor, though, is not only frustrating, but it's totally against, and again, as a Yankee fan, the Yankees just swept the Phillies. Shout out all the Philly fans listening.
Nice.
DJ LeMahieu's corpse and the whole 9 yards. But the Yankees did this past week, and we don't want to go over the luxury tax and, we want to hold on to prospects and our future and all this stuff. And it's like, dude, your goal every year is to win the Super Bowl or to win the World Series and whatever. And you're the biggest brand in the sport. You make the most money, and your stadium's sold out every week and the whole 9 yards. It's like the cash flow and all that stuff's not a problem. So I think CD gets done probably in the next week or two before the season starts. They got to get him in camp. They got to get this thing rolling. They need him. Micah and Dak feel like a mid-season or next year thing, especially Dak. How about you?
I think Dak is just sort of has leaned into this. I think it was just earlier this week where he's like, well, look, all my favorite quarterbacks that I watched growing up didn't finish with the same team. It's just the nature of the beast. And, do I want to be a Cowboy? Yes. But I'm not afraid of the other side. And to me, that's just openly like, hey, I don't care. You don't want to do it. He's bet on himself before. Remember, he destroyed his leg and everyone's like, oh, he's going to have to take less. No, he got more. He's bet on himself at every turn. If he hits free agency, even if he is average this year, even, because last year we were talking about him maybe being an MVP candidate, at least for a good part of the season, until they got blown up by San Francisco. So I think he is totally fine with, I'm going to go out there. Maybe Seattle maybe they're over Geno Smith. Maybe as you mentioned, the Giants, Daniel Jones. Are they stuck with Daniel Jones? Well, they don't have to be stuck with him after next year. There's a whole bunch of possibilities there. Pittsburgh is a team that's got 2 quarterbacks essentially on 1-year deals. They're paying Russell nothing and Justin Fields. Like,
they could be a team that just decides, you know what, we're sick of the sort of a purgatory we've been in at quarterback. We've got a good team. Let's go get Dak. And, we'll pay that kind of money. There's going to be 4 or 5 teams that will put themselves in the mix for that. And Dak's going to be the beneficiary because he is. You're right. He's going to go over $60 million per year. I don't think there's any question about that. I think Lamb gets done because I think he has to get done. And Mike is just you talk to people around the league. Mike is a different dude. He's got a different approach. He's been awesome. But to your point, has he been better than anyone else? And do you give him that? And what have you won? You haven't won anything. I think I could see Jerry pushing that one a little bit too, much like he's doing here with Prescott. Okay, if you go win us some playoff games, if you have us playing in the Super Bowl, I'll write the check. But until we get to that point, we've pushed it far, but we haven't gone far enough. And I'm not sure I'm willing to keep doing that for someone that has not delivered in the biggest moments. San Francisco's got an interesting one too, right? Because Trent Williams sees all the money left tackles are getting paid. He's the best one by far. He wants more money. And then Brandon Ayuk, who, as you mentioned early on, he's dapping up John Lynch, but he's been very vocal talking about staying off the internet. He's been on the Twitter and TikTok and Instagram and all these different things and constantly little digs here and there and dissatisfaction and sort of pumping up his relationship with Jaden Daniels, who they briefly crossed paths at Arizona State. They're a Super Bowl team, obviously. I don't think they win a Super Bowl without either one of those guys. So sort of in the position that the Jets are in with Reddick, it's maybe they have a little bit more depth because McDonald was the first round pick and there's possibility there. But there's no Ayuk on that roster. They drafted Ricky Pearsall. He's dealing with a hamstring as it is. Ricky Pearsall is not Ayuk. Ayuk's one of the 5 or 7 best receivers in the league. I know people say it's that offense, Will, right? But to me, he's their get out of jail free card. When things are going wrong, he's the guy they go to. They can scheme up all these different things, but sometimes it doesn't always work scheme-wise. And then who's the guy that can get open? He's the guy that gets open on 3rd and 7. He's the guy that gives them the ability to stretch the field. I think for as much as the Kittle and some of the pieces underneath that we see Debo, he might be the guy that makes it go, at least in terms of the skill position guys other than McCaffrey, go more than anyone else. So he's got them by I would imagine, really, when I think about this, they got to be saying to him, look, man, Debo's not going to be back after this year. That's going to be your money. You and Purdy are going to get paid, but that's where some of the money's coming from. So just, suck it up, play under the deal this year, and we'll get the thing done. And it just doesn't seem like he's biting, or maybe he's just being smart and saying, screw training camp. I don't want to do this anymore. And Williams is the same thing. Look, man, I know how good I am. I've helped transform your team. You could do so many things with me. And even though he's getting up there in age, he's still been a dominant player. That's a tough spot where, there's certain guys that like you said, your Patriots, your timeline, the timeline with Judon isn't great. So okay, if you walked away from him, I can understand. In San Francisco's case, there's no one even close to those 2 guys on the roster. And in Williams' case, there's nobody close to him in the league. So how do you not pay them? How do you not make that work?
Yeah, the one thing I just want to finish one thing on Micah. The one thing that I want to see from him this year, and again, maybe it's just perception, feels like every year he starts so fast and he's unbelievable. And as the year goes on, his body starts to wear down a little bit. He gets tired. He plays 1,000 miles an hour. He's an elite athlete as it gets. Just feel like at the end of the year, it seems like he starts to slow down quite a bit. And it's I don't know, maybe you want to see a little bit more from him to give him that 35, 36 a year. When it comes to the Niners, I think they're 2 very separate situations. Brad Spielberger, formerly FPFF, now, kind of working on the player side of things, tweeted about this and was basically saying, right now he's owed $20.9 million 2024, but there's no guarantees left. Probably looking for some cash in 25 and 26. It makes sense. He is not the highest paid tackle anymore. And then on top of that, he has no money remaining after this year that's guaranteed. So, and he's got, I think it's a $31 or $32 million cap hit next year, or whatever it is, 18 is dead money. So the Niners could feasibly cut him if they needed to make money for somebody else. He's probably looking for, hey, lock me in for 2 more years in terms of at least a year and a half after this. I play till I'm 38, hopefully win a title, and I walk off and I'm a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm sure that's probably a lot of the thinking. Let me get one more payday. He got paid, I think, 2 years ago. 2 off seasons ago, get 5 for 140 or whatever it was. It was some crazy deal, but it's really only money in 2.5 years, and we're seeing that now. Ayuk, again, we referenced the receiver market. It's nuts. So we all agree and all this different stuff. I think with Ayuk, what's tough is he's worth a first rounder for pretty much any team in the league, not picking in the top 5 or 10. We referenced New England, like them and Pittsburgh and other teams desperately probably want that. Go get open in front of anybody, can do everything. It just makes you think back 2 years ago, just from a Jets perspective, they're picking 4 and 10 overall, and they take Garrett Wilson and everything. And everyone's connecting Debo and the Jets, and with the Jets offer 10. Mm-hmm. No, and that's the same offseason as Tyreek Hill and all these guys. Man, the Jets dodged a bullet not trading a 10th overall pick for Debo, and I'm not sure the Niners don't regret giving that extension. Awesome player, seems like an awesome dude, and you watch the receiver stuff on Netflix and all these different things. Like, not saying he's not awesome. His body is not going to get any younger. He is getting hurt all the time now, and even more so than he used to. And I just feel like he wasn't very good last year. I think he's so important to them, but it feels like he keeps getting hurt over and over, and they get longer and longer. So I don't know. I wonder if you're sitting there in the Niners and you're like, damn, man, like, I wish we maybe just traded Debo for what we could have at the time and just gone all in on Ayuk and drafted a guy like they did with Pierce all this year. Again, not trying to crap on Debo. It's just I'd much rather have Ayuk than Debo at this point.
Well, Debo's a far better player than Juju Smith-Schuster is, but the Patriots gave Schuster the 2-year deal in free agency last offseason, even though the league knew that his knee was messed up. The Patriots somehow thought that they were going to be fine with it. He caught 29 passes last year. He's 27 years old, by the way. That's another one of those ages that you just can't believe that. How is Juju only 27 years old? It feels like he's been around forever, but he was drafted at 20. Debo, a better player. And your point about the injury thing is interesting because I think he played 14 games last year, but it's not the games that he played. It's how long he played in the games. And there are a lot of games where he gets in the game, he makes a play or two, Debo's hurt. And then what you planned for all week, look, not that Kyle can't coach around it, but and has the people to do it, but Debo's out again. There were so many games last year, including the Super Bowl, where Debo goes out, and even if he comes back, then he's lesser the player. He's playing with the quad contusion or the calf hurts or the ankle, and then the thing that makes him special, he's lost some of that juice, and he's put so much into it, which is I understand why he wanted to get paid the way he was. At the time when they were using especially a lot of running back, but his body has sort of paid a price for that. And you're sort of seeing the toll that's taken on him. The wide receiver market in general is nuts. The latest guy was DJ Moore. You mentioned 110 million. I like DJ Moore a lot, but now, and we'll probably get into this in a later episode with the quarterbacks, but I feel like we're in an inflection point with the wide receivers now. Like, how many guys are worth that kind of money? I don't know that he is. He's a damn good player. But is he that player? I mean, I understand the market bears what the market gets, and God bless him for getting it. But it's like at some point, teams are going to start saying to yourself, like, you know what? Rather than go deep in on this receiver, or, hey, we're not going to give this really good receiver a second contract because we don't want to pay him $25 million a year. We're just going to keep drafting and developing. And as we've seen year after year, that position is bringing a lot of good talent from the college ranks, because basically that's what they do in college now, spread them out and throw it around. And we're seeing some morphing into that in the NFL as well. So it's like you can find those guys. And I just wonder the Patriots strategy, drafting Polk and double dipping and taking Baker in the 4th round, even though there's some character concerns there. Like, let's just keep throwing darts at that. And if we're good at player development, we're going to work. These guys are going to work. And maybe we hit on the big guy. Maybe somebody becomes the next star. Well, then he's our star for the next 2 or 3 years at a reasonable contract. And if they don't, well, we just keep throwing the darts until we find that guy. And I think that's I understand why Chicago did what they did. And again, DJ Moore is a good player, but I don't know about you. I would not have gone to that length for him.
Yeah, no, look, with DJ Moore and just kind of the receiver markets and things like that as a whole, I just feel like you mentioned the inflection point. I think we've seen this with running backs. I think we've seen this with linebackers and things. Instead of paying guys and going and drafting multiple guys in the 4th round, backup quarterbacks, things like that. So, yeah, the DJ Moore thing is just weird because they just traded for Keenan Allen, who clearly wanted to get extended. And Moore's a better player at this point in his career, probably, and he's obviously way younger.
You drafted Doomsday,
I just feel like did you need? I guess look, it's a cheaper deal. I think it was 27.5 versus what Lamb's going to come in at and these other guys. But I also think to myself, you could have waited maybe 8 weeks and seen how he was with Caleb. And it's like,
Mhm.
I don't know, man. Caleb's looking great with he's picking out Rome, and he's got Keenan Allen. And can we get Keenan Allen on a cheaper thing for 2 years? Then, like, again, like I get why they did it, and it's like for them it was getting ahead of it almost with DJ Moore, where it's like if he has another big year, he's going to be a $30+ million a year guy. But yeah, receivers getting. I just wonder if it gets to this point where, again, I mentioned the running backs, like the Jets obviously have Breece Hall, but for a while there, the Jets were, drafting running backs and signing running back, paid all that money to Le'Veon Bell. Instead, they've gone every year in the 4th or 5th round. They're going to take a running back and hope, can we go by committee here? And, and edge rushers and different things like that. So, yeah, I'm interested. The Bears are interesting, man. We'll get into obviously, season previews and stuff, but like all the things are there for them to be pretty damn good this year.
Right.
But it's all kind of got to click. It's got to be like, can Rome adjust year one? Can DJ Moore build on last year? And it'll be a lot more down the field stuff, or is it going to be a lot more intermediate and some of the screen and short game? Is Keenan Allen going to be healthy? Is the offensive line going to hold up? Is like the defense as good as it was at the end of last year? Was it a fluke? So yeah, the receiver market and quarterback market and edge and corner, those are the 4 spots right now, obviously premium positions outside of tackle. They just feel like they're so expensive now that, like, we talk about Sauce Gardner, we talk about these other guys. Like the reason Surtain and Sauce Gardner are not only probably the 2 best corners in the game, but they're in rookie deals. And it's like the insane amount of value those guys present versus Jalen Ramsey's awesome, but he's getting 25 a year. Not quite as appealing. So yeah, the receiver market's definitely one that it's going to be interesting to watch. Just there's these couple of extensions that are due, and then in a year's time, does Tyreek get extended again? Like does Davante get extended again? Yeah, they both like to. Like, but is it?
Well, you said if more like, they get ahead of it, but if he has a really good year, then you don't think he's going to knock on the door and say, hey, the market went up a little bit more. Maybe you can give me a little bit more of a raise. I just think it's an interesting position the way it's grown, and I'm wondering when there's teams are just going to say we're putting a cap on it. We'll take 4 good receivers versus paying 1 great one or one that's very good but getting great money. Like I think we might get to that point sooner rather than later. All right, breakout candidates. I'll lead us off. I'll give you the 2 that I had. One in the AFC, one in the NFC was what I put to you in our group email here. Khalil Shakir from the Bills, 39 catches last year, 611 yards, 2 touchdowns. Modest numbers, although the yardage is pretty good for a slot guy. He and Josh Allen, though, you could tell as the year went on, especially after Joe Brady took over the offensive coordinator and they started to phase Stefon Diggs out, that was he and Dalton Kincaid were his 2 little go-to guys, and they developed a rapport. And now talking to my friends covering the Bills, it's like this guy every day shows up. He's making plays. Like I think he could be in the Cole Beasley realm for them. Beasley had, 1,000 yards receiving for a couple of years there in Buffalo, 80+ catches. Like I think he has that capability, but maybe a little bit more explosion in his game. Defensively, in the NFC, Nakobe Dean, 3rd-year linebacker for Philadelphia. He's been really good against the run when he got to play last year. He's, again, still physically, he's never going to be perfect. That's why he sort of fell in the draft. But I love the player coming out. I like watching him. He finds the football. And so when they have those big bodies in front of him, I think it makes life a lot easier for him on 1st and 2nd down to be a force in the run game. And like, I like him to maybe take a step forward this year and have people start talking about him, assuming he can stay healthy, as like one of those good young linebackers in the game.
Yeah. So I'll go 2 names here. One's a rookie, so I guess it's technically a breakout candidate, but the Rams are supposed to be really good. And I think last year they surprised some people. Both me and you saw Braden Fisk down in Mobile. Mm-hmm. And he was a guy that I thought was a good, not great prospect by any means. And then he was unbelievable that entire week. I'm like, man, this guy's nuts. And Rams lose Aaron Donald. Raheem Morris moves on. And there's a bunch of different things kind of happen with the Rams where it feels like they're going to be really good, but you're not really sure defensively. Like they had a lot of those rookies break out last year. Do they have another situation where, this happens this year again? They get a defensive tackle come in and, can he pair, their rookie class from last year and break out and just be like, hey, the Rams are going to go win the NFC West, or they surprise the Niners or whatever it may be. From an AFC perspective, I'm going to go with my guy. Of course, he gets hurt today, and Michael Carter. I think he's a guy who we talk about extensions with the Jets. He's a guy they should be getting ahead of. He's a guy that should have been extended this offseason. I'm not sure. Again, I know they want to see some wins before they start paying defensive guys, money and all these different things. I get it. He's a guy that's going to be due a 3-year, $30 million-ish extension, somewhere in that range, the Teron Johnson money, and some of these guys, the Kenny Moore money, in Indy. Carter's a guy who has had 3 or 4, like, the most controversial penalty calls on interceptions he's had. He had a pick 6 against New England 2 years ago that the Jets season felt like it totally cratered the second that penalty was called. You were at that game. It was Jets are 6-2 against New England, struggling, and it's 10-0 at half, and all of a sudden, pick 6 gets called back. New England goes down, kicks a field goal, and the rest, Zach Wilson implodes. And then last year, in front of the whole country, Jets-Chiefs game, the infamous 20-20 or whatever it was, and Carter picks off Mahomes on an awful decision, and there's the penalty obviously on Sauce. This Jets team should be really good. They should be scoring a lot more points. Carter should have a lot more opportunities to have interceptions. If you told me he's an All-Pro, this year, I would not be surprised in any way, shape, or form. He's a guy who, if he doesn't get paid, and a year from now on the show, we'll be talking about Michael Carter to X team for 3 years, $34 million and X, Y, and Z. So one rookie, one guy going into year 4. I like your picks as well. I just think Shakir, like, big postseason last year. The Bills need someone to step up. I don't know if Keon Coleman's going to be quite as good as he's getting made out to be early on.
Right.
Maybe he will, but someone's got to take those Stefon Diggs reps. And, if he can even take 50% of it, he should put up some pretty big numbers.
Well, there are teams who are talking about the receivers, and do you want to pay some good receivers and draft and develop? They let Diggs go. Diggs still is a good football player. Obviously, there were some things going on there personally with him and the team that made it easier to kind of move away from him at this point. But like Coleman, Shakir, they let Gabe Davis go for big money elsewhere. Like they signed Curtis Samuel. It's not an outrageous deal. He's a good football player, like not a great football player, but he's a good football player. Find ways to get him the football. And it seems like they're just going to, all right, we got Josh on the big deal. We had to rework some of our defense here. Let's try this approach and see if it works. And the Chiefs have tried that approach, and they've won a couple Super Bowls. Granted, their quarterback is better than anybody else in the league. But be that as it may, it sort of sets a little bit of the table for everyone else. Like, oh, well, they're doing it like this. Why can't we try to do it this way? Draft and develop, sign a couple veteran guys, and try to piece it together that way. I think that's going to do it for the program. Our very first program. Well, we got it done. Oh, you know what? Actually, here I am saying I want your thoughts quickly on the Hard Knocks and the Giants. I think it's been fascinating. I think it's been the best Hard Knocks that we've seen since we're going to eat goddamn snacks with Rex Ryan, like however many years ago that was. Like a pretty cool process. It's getting a lot of critique from NFL people like, oh, I can't believe they let him have the access. That's why I liked it. They did give him some access. We actually got to learn some stuff.
Yeah, look, it's 2010. It's last time the Jets were in the playoffs. So there was a big holdout that offseason that people remember as well. Darrelle Revis showed up at the end of Hard Knocks, and maybe Hassan Reich will do the same this year. The interesting thing with the Giants Hard Knocks is this. I feel like there's so much access to the kind of, unless you're at, you're talking to people around the league and you're at the Combine, you're at the Senior Bowl, you're at the East West Shrine, you're at the owners' meetings, like that stuff you don't really see. And they've given you an inside look into their draft board, which I couldn't believe that was on there. That's awesome to see that. The way they break down free agency has been really cool. Trades, the Saquon and stuff, the involvement of ownership on how these free agents and players get re-signed and not. And we talked a little bit about ownership with the Jets and Patriots and these other things of kind of meddling in a lot of these extensions. We got to see that a little bit, on Hard Knocks. And I think the one other thing that was interesting is, we've kind of started to get access a little bit with the trade ups and, Indy offering 15, 46 and a 2 for number 6. The Jets, their offer was blurted out, but it sounded something along the lines of, hey, we want to trade it for Rome or Neighbors. The one other thing I think that's been interesting with the Hard Knocks stuff is getting to see some of the way these guys interact with the prospects. And, Brian Dable having these guys on the board, and Daniel Jones has been a guy we've talked about, hey, what's his future look like in New York? Brian Dable's face told you all you need to know when they said, hey, we're going to go get a playmaker here. He's like, oh, cool. Like, we're getting a playmaker. That's awesome. But our quarterback's still Daniel Jones. Like, so I think that's been really cool. And I think it's a different thing. I think part of what's gotten a little stale about the summer series is that it's really like hyping up the undrafted guys that mostly get cut and the feel-good stories, but they don't hit as much in camp anymore. There's not as many fights. So now it's kind of gotten a little stale. This was definitely an interesting change-up, and I wonder – it makes you wonder, will as many teams give as much access, I guess, as Hard Knocks has kind of been a thing where teams don't really want to do it. as much anymore. And I wonder if that'll continue, from the offseason side of things.
Yeah, it's definitely going to make people think long and hard about it. It's unfortunate that, like, I almost feels like the league should just be like, nope, this is what's doing. This is part of the deal. This is what we're going to do. And this year it's going to be you, New England. You're doing the in-season hard knocks, and you guys are doing the off-season hard. But to your point, like a lot of these things, for people that don't know, like the team gets to look it over. So if there's stuff that they didn't want out there, that would get gonged. Although, as we heard, like Saquon didn't know necessarily that his conversation was being taped. It's his sort of final conversation with Joe Shane, the GM for the Giants, before he moved on or had moved on to the Eagles. So very interesting stuff. Will, great time. Again, it took like a year to get to this point. We got here. I think you're married. I think both my kids were in high school. Now they're in college. Like I've been through like 3 different dogs since we started conversations about having this podcast. I'm excited. We still haven't settled totally in on the schedule, folks, just because of training camp being what it is. We're just trying to find little windows during training camp in which we can do this. But once we get to the regular season, we're going to produce it twice a week. It's probably going to be Monday, Friday, but we'll firm that up with everybody, and we'll get back to you on that. But obviously, we want you to like, subscribe, watch us wherever you get us, wherever you get your podcast. You can watch us on YouTube. We appreciate the support, and I'm really looking forward to doing this, diving deeper and deeper. And I just can't wait for the game part of it, because the game part is then you can start to get a little bit into the X's and O's, and like some of this is soap opera stuff that has to be covered because it's important in terms of how teams are built and how they go, Will. But like when we get to that point, like who's playing well, who's not playing well, why aren't they playing well, what's working for this team, what's not working for this team, like that's the kind of stuff that I'm really looking forward to getting into with you, with your football background, and me being around the league for a bazillion years because I'm old. So thanks again, all 32 podcasts. Like and subscribe. We will talk to you again soon.